Well, here we are. I guess it's about that time to put in some real work. It's time to start prepping this engine to pull it out. We're gonna have to do a tear down and build on this thing, but first thing we got to do is get her out. So I'm gonna try to time lapse this. We're gonna do it in segments. I probably won't do it all together, but we're gonna start breaking things loose. So let's just get right to it. Here we go. Go time. Where I started was this plate for the radiator. 2 bolts here, 2 bolts here. One goes in from behind the fan shroud, another one right in the middle, another one on this end. Pull those out. That plate will lift right up. Next thing, upper radiator hose. It's got the typical hose clamps. So disconnect that bad boy, you know how to do that, and yoink that off of that water neck. Upper rad hose off. Then you're going to do your lower radiator hose. Way down there, same kind of clamp, the hose clamp, and you're going to have to yank that thing off of the neck. It's another big 2-inch hose. When you do, everything is going to come running out of this, all the fluids. So make sure you are prepared. Get yourself a drip bucket and some rags, because it never just goes right in the bucket, right? While that's draining, you've got this other hose. I believe this is for the heater core. I'm not sure. It's something to do with the AC heater situation. I think it's for the heater core. Let me know if I'm wrong. But either way, regardless of what it's to, it's got to come off. Another basic hose clamp. I'm labeling everything just because it's easier to remember. Last two things, you've got the coolant lines, transmission cooler lines. They're steel lines. It is a 13 millimeter nut. Gosh, this is blurry the whole time, isn't it? Alright, 13 millimeter nut. It goes right in the radiator, and then there's one down there at the bottom as well. You've got 2 lines. They're both steel lines, both 13 mils. Once you've done that, this radiator is ready to lift right out. So I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, easy peasy. Once those lines and hoses are disconnected, this thing will just straight up and out. It's not too bad. It weighs about 25 pounds, maybe, give or take. Yeah, that thing is gnarly. Probably been in there for a while. We've got a lot of buildup on this, so maybe it cleans up. Maybe that green is a sign of something bad that I don't know about. If you guys know what that is and it's a cause for concern, let me know, because I am learning as I go here and taking you along for the ride. Plus, this thing is just beat up. You see in all of those little vents for the, I guess, what is that, the condenser side? I mean, they're just smashed in all to hell. So I'll probably be better off replacing this. It doesn't leak, and I guess it works, but anyway. All right, there's my initial tear into it, getting the rad out. So that's going to give me more clearance on the front. This fan shroud, now it's all the way around the fan, so lifting it up is a pain in the butt. If you pull the rad out first, you can bust that fan shroud loose from the bottom and then just slide it towards the front of the truck, lift it right out, and then our kind of front system here will be exposed. This will just give you, what does it look like, maybe 10 more inches of clearance when you get ready to pull that engine. So it's not a lot of work, and it'll save you a lot of heartache, because you're probably going to be banging and tearing things up trying to get that engine out past this front. So alright, we'll get to the next step. Okay, found out a couple of things. So I thought this was steel, this radiator. It's copper and brass, which is why this is all turning greenish. That copper gets wet, gets that corrosion buildup, whatever you call it, So not a concern. The rest of the radiator looks good. Got the fan shroud off. The next thing to do for me is the carburetor. Fairly simple. See these studs in the corner? There's 4 of them. 1 stud, 2 stud, 2 on the back. Pull the nuts off, disconnect the fuel line, disconnect the vacuum line, disconnect the throttle linkage, the spring, and the actual throttle cable, right? And that's it. This thing is free. Comes right up. My studs for this were pretty loose. These are the studs that stick up where you had those 4 nuts in the corner that you took off, or that I took off. They were on these studs. These studs were fairly loose, so I just kind of took them out so as not to risk them falling down in there. And then you've got your series of gaskets and the spacer. So 1 gasket, spacer, and then another gasket on bottom. So I have 3 pieces because I needed that spacer. And there we go, down to the intake manifold. Next step for me is getting some of these hoses, getting the spark plug wires, getting all of that off, some of this other electrical stuff, getting that all disconnected. Probably gonna be moving the brake booster, and that should be all of the electronic and water flow and yada yada disconnecting that I have to do. So let me get all that done. We'll get all that kind of out of the way and laid up, and then we'll move on to the more mechanical stuff, nuts and bolts. Alright, easy peasy, nothing to it. Just snatching off your spark plug wire ends. I pulled this hose that goes to the AC, pulled that off, and we've got all our little wires and whatnot already done. There's a couple of more wires that I've got to do, but before I move on to that, little quick tidbit, just something I do. When you're pulling your spark plugs, I get a piece of cardboard and label them out. 2468, 1357. The reason for that is if you have something going on, you look at these spark plugs and they tell you a story, you know, of what's going on inside that cylinder. Is it rich? Is it lean? You know, is it wet? Are they all fouled out? You know, this hasn't been run a lot since we put the new plugs in, so it's not really gonna apply. These are all still looking pretty good, but just a little tidbit. You know, if you're pulling spark plugs, keep them in order, so you'll know. Maybe give you a little indication what's going on in your cylinder. All right, we get back to this engine. Keep pulling things apart. All right, next up, we're gonna have to get the exhaust manifold off. We've got nuts, kind of here and there. I think there's, what is there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We got 8 nuts. The exhaust manifold, those headers, that's the black tubes, the black pipes right there. So anyway, got to bust those loose, kind of drop those down. We may have to get underneath and disconnect them as well. Not sure if they'll just kind of pull out of the way, because remember, the idea is we're going to be lifting this engine out. So if they'll just kind of fall away, we're good. If not, well, we're going to have to disconnect them down underneath and kind of slide those out. But same thing over here, 8 nuts over here. So let me bust those loose and let these kind of fall away, and we'll jump back in here. Before I do that, if I could jump back in here real quick, another little tidbit. If you're not terribly familiar with everything, this is what I do. I label things with blue tape a lot. These are my power steering lines, and I know they only go in a certain place. I believe that's the case, but in the event that those threads are the same, I mark them, right? Inside, outside. So I know which line is which. And I've got 2 lines over here, 2 hoses, coming from the AC system, heater core and whatnot, and they look very much the same. So I've got this one marked. This one goes to the rad, and this one is marked intake. So I know where things go when I'm putting hoses and lines and yada yada back on. So if you're not terribly familiar, that's an easy way. Taking pictures, taking videos, sure, but when you're getting ready to put this thing back together, it makes it real easy to identify lines and know where they go. Alright, on to the exhaust. Alright, the exhaust is off. It's a little crooked. If you can see, it's kind of slanting downward. And just kind of hanging because it's a little too tall to slide it on out. I'd have to lift the truck up a little bit. So I'm gonna just kind of keep it tucked away and lift the engine up off the way it is. The other side had more clearance. I think it is the oil filter on that other side. This one dropped right down. There we go. Exhaust manifold ports clean. That is sitting right there. No big deal. Alright, so this side is broke loose. Good to go. Couple more wires, right? Need to bust loose the starter. That's it right there. Get that disconnected. And get the alternator disconnected. And bottom fuel line. We should be ready to go to motor mounts after that. I'm going to double check and make sure none of this is still plugged in. But I believe if the brake booster being moved out of the way, that's going to be the last thing. And then this should be ready to bust motor mounts loose and yoink her out of there. So, alright, exhaust done. A few more details. Correction, not going to the motor mounts yet. Transmission. That's what I meant. Transmission be busted loose next. But we have the power steering lines. Those are done. Disconnected. Alright, alternator is disconnected. Fuel pump lines disconnected. Starter back there disconnected. So we are ready for also distributor in the back, that's disconnected. We are ready for transmission next. All of my electronics disconnected. All of my fluid lines, air lines, hoses and good stuff, that's all disconnected. We now just have motor mounts and transmission. So that's going to be a pain in the you know what. We've got 2 bolts on each side of the bell housing, and then we have 2 bolts at the top. 2 on the sides, no big deal. 2 on the top, if you've ever messed with it, my goodness. So probably going to use like a 2-foot extension and a swivel socket to get up there. I will do my best to get you a visual to see how that's going. And then what's going to be interesting is disconnecting the torque converter from the flywheel. So it's going to be two steps: bell housing bolts and then torque converter bolts. But that's what's next. That's where we're at. So stand by. We'll get all that set up and rocking and rolling. Y'all want to see something funny? Watch my dog. He's watching me eat, but watch me. He's going to try to act like he's not looking at me. Give me a little fry. Watch him try to catch him looking at me again. Watch this. See what he does. Okay, let's get under here. Have a look at this transmission. Alright. I got a light set up here. Let's see, that light is way too bright, isn't it? Alright, hang on. Okay. There, you see there's 2 bolts, 2 bolt heads, and right in between them there's that stud. A kind of a little, I don't know what you want to call it, a little dowel, a little nipple. Top of your screen, there's a bolt head. Bottom of your screen, there's a bolt head. Those two need to come out. It's a 9/16. And then if you follow this long extension right up over the bell housing, way up there, there's another one. You're going to need a swivel socket and a 18-inch to 2-foot extension to get up there. So I'm on it, and I think I've got it broken loose. Yeah, I'm on it, and it's turning. So breaking that one loose. I'm gonna go ahead and finish getting that out. We're looking at the front of the truck, brother, by the way, so you kind of are oriented to where you're at. I'm gonna finish breaking that one loose, and it's the exact same thing on the other side. 2 bolts here on the side, 1 bolt up at the top. Then you go over there, you'll have 2 bolts on the side, and then 1 bolt at the top on that side, and that's your 6 bolts to separate the bell from the block. So let me get these pulled, and I'm going to get something to brace this transmission. Thankfully, a veteran mechanic, also known as my uncle, advised me that even though this transmission is mounted on the cross member, this front of it is still going to sag and put things in a bind, and we want to avoid that. So I need to get something underneath the bell of this transmission, a jack with a block, or get a ratchet strap under there and snug it up, something to support this transmission and keep it from getting in a bind. So anywho, we're going to get that supported. We're going to get those bolts out. But these are the 6 bolts, 3 on this side, 3 on the other side, that you're doing for the transmission. Stand by. Alright, all 6 of the bolts are out. So let's play like this is the shape of the bell. Okay? This little alien head looking thing that I drew. So we're looking at it from behind. So we're behind the transmission, behind the engine, looking forward. This is what you'll see. These were the 2 bolts on the side, and remember that little dowel in between. 2 bolts on the other side, dowel in between, and then you've got these 2 bolts at the top. Obviously this is way smaller, but this is the bolt configuration on the GM for the transmission. 6 bolts. These 2 at the top. Remember, you're going to need like an 18-inch or 2-foot extension and a swivel, and it's a 9/16. So on mine, it just happened to be that these bolts are a little smaller. If you can see the difference here. My top bolts were a little smaller. I don't know if everybody's will be that way, but that's the way I'm going to put it back in. So I'm just going to put the bolts back where they go. But just so you know how it was on mine, I don't know if it's always like that. So anywho, there we go. We've got the transmission supported. I'm going to get under there and show you what I've got, and then the next thing we've got to do is separate the torque converter from the flywheel. So let's see what we got. Alright, we are up close and personal now. So I'm facing the back of the truck. Okay, here's an oil pan, oil drain plug, dust cover to the flywheel, transmission fluid pan. Okay, I'm kind of braced right here on the corner of that transmission pan. Not a bunch of weight. It's already a little wrinkly. I didn't do that. It's already a little wrinkly, but anyway, not a bunch of weight. Just get it around the edge there so you don't collapse that pan. That's what I did, or put a piece of wood across. Probably would have been smarter. So this right here is what we're going to take off. Flywheel is underneath this, and it's just 4 bolts, 4 small screws. Zoom in, there you go. See, there's one, and I should have one right there in the corner, but looks like she's not lined up correctly. And then this is right in front of the starter, just to kind of orient you to where you're at. And remember, we're facing the back of the truck at this point. Come around that curve, There's another one. So the curve, there's one on the corner. The curve, there's one on the corner. And then back up in here on its little point as it goes up closer to the bottom of the block. I don't know, is that going to show you what we're talking about or not? There we go, that one. I say that one. Alright. Anyway, that's it. It's just those 4 little bolts, screws, what have you. They're 10 millimeter. So I'm going to drop those, and then this dust cover should come off. So let's see if I'm just making stuff up or if that works. Alright, got the bolts out, so maybe we can jiggle this thing down. I don't know. Pry it down or pull it down or something. Bribe it to come down. Yeah, I don't know. There it is. Now I'm going to have to just figure out how to kind of sneak it past these coolant lines and all of that, but to spare you having to listen to all this banging and rattling, we'll get back right here in a second. Okay, got it off. So what we're looking at now is flywheel, right, with the teeth and torque converter right behind it. It's got 4 or 5 quarts of oil in it, so we want that to stay where it's at, or else we're going to have a big mess. Also, we're still facing the back of the truck, right? So, transmission pan, torque converter, flywheel, oil pan. Now, if you get right up under here, let me see, can we focus in? Can we see anything? Maybe a better light. Hang on. Now, let's see. Alright, you see that nut right there? That little bolt? Nut, whatever. We got to get that off. And there should be, let's see, there's one way up there. I don't know if we can focus on it or not. Way up there. You can see it. It's at about 8 o'clock on your screen here. And then there's another one right kind of, you know, right there. See it? Alright, we've got to get those 3 bolts out to separate that torque converter from the flywheel, and that will complete separating the engine from the transmission. Now, how do we get to those? Well, this one, you know, sure, we'll put a little end wrench or socket on it, whatever. Those other ones, we're going to have to rotate this engine over by hand to roll that flywheel down and kind of roll those nuts around where we can get to them. You know, we'll probably get them over here where we got some room to work. But that's how we got to do it. We got 3 of them, so I will be up and down, rolling it around, taking the bolt out, getting up there, rolling it around. I might be able to do it from right here. I don't know. Maybe I can just kind of reach up and on the crank pulley while I lay right here. And I'll just work both hands. But anywho, all right, let me get what I need. I'm not sure the size of this. Yeah, I don't know. We're about to find out. But okay, stand by while we get on that. Alright, we are back separating that flywheel from the torque converter. And let me tell you, that bolt is tight. I've had to use that long extension to get me back out towards the front so I could really get down on it, because goodness gracious. Alright, so I'm going to pull that bolt out. Got it. Set that thing out of the way. Now I've got my other socket on the crank pulley, so we're just going to roll that over. See that? Uh-oh. Don't let things fall on your face. Alright, hang on. Let me get back on my pulley spot here. and we can roll that back over. Oops, that's not on. There, it's on. We're going to roll that over until we find that next nut. Should be about a third of a rotation. There it is, coming into view. There, you see it. All right, that looks like about where we need to be. So I am going to continue pulling these out. Let's see, make sure you can see that nut right there. See it? Yeah. I'm going to continue pulling these out, and once we get these done, it's just motor mounts and we're ready to rock and roll. All right. Whew. All right, now that is done, the engine is completely free from the transmission. We have just the motor mounts left to do here, okay, as far as getting the engine out. Before I do that, I'm gonna have to pull this core support. My the boom on my picker isn't long enough, and you know, something about it swinging from overhead makes me nervous. So we're gonna call that a backup. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this one here. This is full preparation for removing this big block. The engine is disconnected from everywhere except the mounts. So I'm gonna go ahead and shut this one down here, and we're gonna do right behind it. I'm gonna be posting the actual removal of the engine, pulling the core support, and actually pulling the engine. So if you want to check that out, stick around, come back, give us a like, subscribe, do what you got to do. All right, Go Time Garage, we are out for now.